Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to Out Comes the Sun Radio. I am here with my beautiful co-host, Melissa Yamaguchi, and I'm Mariel Hemingway. And today, we've got a really interesting show today. I really like it. It got my head reeling, but we talk about what I'm doing here in a hotel room in Idaho.
You're like Waldo. Where are you?
I know, right? Because 2 days ago, I was in Kansas City. I was in Smallville. I know that's a fictional place, but they've actually created, there's actually a little town, and now they call it Smallville because it was whatever the Superman series, they based the town on this Kansas City town. And now they kind of call the town Smallville, even though it isn't really. Anyway, that's a whole other story. What I'm doing in Idaho is I'm here for Optum Idaho, and that I work with them because they have a whole section for behavioral health, but also now it's become whole health, which is really kind of cool. So we're turning it into, which, as you know, Melissa, this is my passion, is to make people realize that mental health is really about everything you do, what you eat, how you sleep, whether you drink water, meditate, earth, get out in nature, move your body. All of these different things are so important. And Optum has been such a great partner for me, for us, in regard to really getting a message out there, because I do PSAs for them, and tonight, I'm going to Nampa, Idaho, and I'm doing a community conversation with some people, and I'm gonna tell my story a little bit, but then we're gonna break off into little groups, and in these groups, each person and each group will be able to tell their story, talk to the group about what they might be pressing hard on their heart, and I'll be going around with others and experts in the field, kind of guiding them and helping people to get to a place where they feel comfortable enough to tell their story. Because I'm a big believer that once you start to tell your story, that kind of opens the door to a solution.
Yep. I love it. I love it because there's going to be people arriving at this who have no other outlet or no way of knowing how to even begin. And beginning the conversation is sometimes harder than telling the conversation, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's so hard. And we're talking about Idaho. Idaho is a very conservative state, and people don't like to open up about, they're still kind of in that, like, I'm tough enough, I'm pioneer stock. And so it's very challenging. It's not Los Angeles or New York City where everybody's like emoting and going on Instagram.
Your Uber driver's telling you his feelings.
Exactly. Yeah. Their story today is about how, whatever. So it'll be really powerful. And Optum's been very effective. The PSAs that I do,
yes,
I really love them because I've talked about food. I've talked about drinking water. I've talked about people with PTSD coming out of the military or just trauma in their home. I mean, there's just all kinds of, there's so many things that add to, to our mental balance. And they've been such a great partner for that. So I'm grateful to them.
I'm glad you're there doing it with them. They're neat. They're a great team. You even had a PSA that I saw also. I've seen all of them, but one that I thought I get a kick out of it when I see it. It's where you're talking about men. And I think it was the crew that was in the background playing basketball.
Oh yeah.
So my husband is, my son and my husband, big basketball people. They're like, that's not a layup. What was that? And they're watching it because I'm showing. poor team. Yeah. It was but you're doing a great job up there. We're going to need to get it across the country, but you're doing a great job.
No, it's so much fun, and it's so important, and it's having a huge effect. So I'm going to tell you, we've had almost 2 million impressions since just this year of and views on these PSAs. So that means that it's having an impact.
I love it.
For me, that's like, what?
That's so huge. Cool. Congratulations. That's really important. That's good stuff. Good really, stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. So anyway, that's it. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Out Comes the Sun Radio. We have an amazing guest, and she is coming up in just a moment.
2 and 2.
As a mental health advocate and author, I love books. Books have the capacity to inspire, educate, transform, and ultimately help readers all over the world. So if you want to publish your book, or if you need help writing your story, I highly recommend Mindstir Media, rated the #1 best book publisher around the country. Mindstir Media can help you no matter where you are in the book writing or publishing process. Go to mindstirmedia.com to learn more and schedule a consultation. Welcome, everybody, to Out Comes the Sun Radio. You are here with Melissa Yamaguchi, my co-host, and myself, Mariel Hemingway, and we have an amazing guest today. Her name is Darlene Lancer, and she is a married author. She wrote Codependency for Dummies and Conquering Shame and Codependency, 8 Steps to Freeing the True You. She has been helping men and women recover from codependency trauma for over 30 years. Amazing work. Her latest book, Dating, Loving, and Leaving a Narcissist, Essential Tools for Improving or Leaving Narcissistic and Abusive Relationships, will help you take back your power and independence, reclaim yourself, and improve your relationship. You can purchase Darlene's new book on her website, whatiscodependency.com, or on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I'm thrilled to have you here because this is such an important subject. I mean, it's just so important that we talk about not only codependency, but narcissism, which I don't know, I feel like it's been kind of, I'm just now getting an understanding of what narcissism really is, to be quite honest. And I think that it's a very challenging relationship to be in, to come out of, because I think what happens when you're in and you please correct me because you are,
sure.
I am not, but it feels as though that narcissism is very closely linked to passive aggressive behavior. And I was around narcissists pretty much my whole life, and their passive aggressive behavior, and was unable to recognize that in someone, and really fell prey to their ability to manipulate. And I was like, I become like this kitten of like, I become kind of stupid. Like I can't function. I don't know what to do. I'm starting to be able to recognize it, but at first it's blinding. Like, does that make any sense to you?
Oh, absolutely, because it's hidden. It's hostile hostility that's hidden.
Yes.
You know, it's passive, and so you could be insulted, couched in a compliment or sarcasm, and then the words might sound positive, but you feel queasy, and that it's
yes,
there's something bad, and then it's like you don't know what to say because it sounds nice on the surface, and they can just say, well, I was just joking, or what are you implying, and put you on the defensive. And what you're supposed to do is respond to your gut and just say, cut it out, I know what you're doing, and address that directly. So I have a blog on my website about, passive aggression and how to respond to it. Narcissists are master manipulators. And there's something called covert narcissism, and they use more passive aggression, where they're, as opposed to a grandiose narcissist, will just insult you directly. But they both use passive aggression, but you don't have to be a narcissist to be passive aggressive. And actually, codependents can be passive aggressive too. They can be pleasing and be nice, even though they have a lot of resentment. So, or just forgetful. That's like passive aggression, resistant. It's like saying no all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Wow. You just touched on something that kind of sent some bells off in my head. So some of the behaviors of passive aggressiveness. You said saying forgetfulness. No, I'm not lumping. I know there's different reasons people would be forgetful, but some of the tactics of saying no without overtly saying no. I think this happens more than we are aware of. You see it in workplaces nonstop. You see it in sports, in every single scenario, Darlene. Don't you? I mean, this is something that I'd never heard what you said.
Yeah. Sometimes kids will be, maybe they have aggression and anger, but they're not allowed to express it in the home, or they're punished for it. So they just drag their feet. They don't do their homework. They are, moody, and they're just disagreeable. They don't want to cooperate. And it could be just a lot of repressed anger so the antidote is to be able to be assertive, to help people who want to change that behavior, which is usually they're unaware of it, when their partner or somebody else is pointing it out, but is to learn to be assertive. And, I wrote a bunch of ebooks too, to help people with learning new skills, because a lot of overcoming codependency is just learning new skills, learning to be assertive, raising your self-esteem, which you can do because self-esteem is learned, learning self-care, learning to set boundaries. So I have a lot of ebooks that are all like workbooks to help people, self-forgiveness and things like that. So passive aggression used to be a personality disorder in the diagnostic code, but they took it out. So there was a lot of dispute about that, but it used to be a disorder. And when people write me sometimes that they have a spouse that's passive aggressive, I have to tell them it's very hard to deal with it, because it's almost easier when somebody is direct,
right,
and aggressive, and then you can set boundaries. But when somebody just fails to, mothers that don't cook for their kids, they don't help, or just someone who's sitting on the couch, it's hard to make someone do something.
Yeah.
Rather than stop doing something.
The weird thing about passive aggressive, I mean, for me, and I come from a family that has, such brilliance, but also there's this tremendous, alcoholism, this and that, and mental illness, right? And my big fear was that I was going to go crazy, quote unquote crazy, or I was going to be mentally and not even know it. And the person that was passive aggressive towards me really worked on that, because it made me feel crazy. I would think, oh my gosh, maybe I am, maybe I am crazy, maybe this, maybe that. It's very interesting. It's interesting that you say it used to be considered a disorder, because I think that having a name for it is very helpful. I don't know. It's very interesting. I so appreciate your work, because I think it's very difficult for people, especially coming out of a relationship. I've got a very close friend who is coming out of a relationship that was extremely narcissistic and passive aggressive as well. And she's really was wounded. She was wounded for quite some time, and she's still kind of. And she's angry. The funny thing is that you're saying all these things. She's so angry,
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, because what is repressed or unconscious in one person often, shows up in the other. So the passive aggressive person is not expressing their anger. So then their partner feels it, and then they look like the angry, crazy one.
Wow.
They start losing their temper, and then the passive aggressive person says, there you go again, what's wrong with you?
Right.
You think you're the problem, but you're picking up, it's called projective identification. It's a defense that they use, and the other person then carries it. The same thing with shame. Like a narcissist or an abusive parent, like shames their child, and it comes from their background and their insecurity and feeling inferior and inadequate. And then it's called like transferred shame. And then the child carries all that shame, and they think that it's me, it's my fault. What's wrong with me? I'm angry. I don't love my mother, my father. Some other characteristics, since you brought it up, that I go through on my blog is denial, or forgetting things, procrastinating, obstructing, being ambiguous. They never say what they mean. They never get angry. They don't express it openly. They act incompetent. And I mentioned lateness. And they're just generally negative and stubborn or argumentative. And then they play the victim. And narcissists love to do this, that it's all your fault or somebody else's fault. They never
Yes.
take responsibility for it. So, or withholding communication. Like, okay, it's always you, you always win, it's your way. And then they stop. You can't have a discussion with them. They just say, okay, you're right. And then they walk away from a conversation. So
What's
you
the
can't deal
answer?
with it.
Darlene,
think
what do you, what do you, what do you do? What do you do in that situation as a partner, as a coworker, as a boss, or if you're dealing with this and you're addressing an issue, you're trying to be direct and direct an issue. What are a
Well,
few, what are some
the
tools?
first thing I would say is to start becoming an observer and take notes and write down all these behaviors. And so, and read up on it. You can go to my website and there's other information, and learn to spot it and realize that it's not you. So you become very an expert in passive aggression, and then you can call it out.
Yeah.
And you don't want to react or nag or scold or get angry, because you're just escalating the conflict. And by the way, there's like, I have some rules of how to not to deal with an abuser. Your natural instinct is to explain, defend, argue, make your points, or even plead or get angry and scold. None of that helps. In fact, when you argue, you lose.
Yeah.
So you don't want to ignore it either. You want to confront it. You want to confront it in an effective way. And I have something called systematic transactional communication. And I describe it in my book, Dating, Loving, and Leaving a Narcissist. It's how to confront an abuser in a way that they will take notice.
Really?
We have to do it without accusing, because they're usually very sensitive. You know, they can dish, but they can't take it.
Right.
So you don't want to be critical. And also, now I'm not saying everybody who's passive aggressive, but many abusers and certainly narcissists are not interested in your feelings. So you want to share with them how this hurts you and your feelings. They don't care. Their relationships to them are transactional.
Wow.
You have to understand that and deal with them transactionally.
So,
And that's
so
what
what would you say, what would you say, what are some, that you probably have a laundry list of things, but what would you say to, in that conversation? How would you confront it without?
Okay, well, if someone, let's say, is late for dinner or something, you can let them know that you don't like it when they're late, and that you're going to go ahead and maybe they'll make excuses, or I'm not sure what they might say, or just ignore you. And then you let them know that, I'm going to start eating without you. Or if you're meeting them at a restaurant, I'm going to wait 10 minutes. If you're not there, I'm going to leave. So you let them know, and you let them know when you disregard my needs or the effort I put into making dinner, then I don't feel inclined to meet your needs. I mean, I get angry and I don't feel that I'm valued. And so this relationship has to be a two-way street. It has to work for both of us.
Gotcha.
So you let them know the consequences that they will care about.
Right.
Like, my loving feelings go away. Or I don't really feel like going to your office party when, I feel like my effort or my needs are disrespected.
Right.
So it depends. Every relationship is different.
Right.
It's harder when your partner wants nothing from you.
Right.
Then you have no leverage. Those are
Darlene, do they
difficult things.
care? Do they care about your feelings, or do they just not recognize them?
Well, who's they? Are you talking?
Well, they were speaking of the narcissist.
Yeah.
Do the
Because there's
narcissists
people
care?
that are passive aggressive that aren't narcissistic. So
Do people who are narcissist or passive aggressive, how do they handle other people's feelings? Are they cognizant of it?
it depends on the level of narcissism, and especially if they're attacked, they're not going to care.
Okay.
But there's, narcissists lack empathy. That's one of the criteria. But they may have good cognitive empathy, which means they can intellectually understand, but they may not care enough to have it matter. So you have to motivate them.
Right.
Like, this is gonna,
Yes.
you know, we haven't been getting along, and I'm not sure if this relationship will last. Usually they don't want to leave. They want to get their narcissistic supply, meaning they want to get their needs met. They want attention, they want sex, they want adoration, whatever it is, or help in some respect, or money. I don't know what it is they want.
Right.
You have to, figure that out.
What could you explain? Could you tell us the difference between a narcissist, a passive aggressive, and a codependent? I mean, I'm sure they're miles different, but
passive aggressive is just one behavior. It's not like they may be a narcissist, they may not be, they could be codependent. But one of the things that, I have a whole chapter in my book on comparing narcissists and codependents. So they both have a lot of symptoms in common. In fact, I believe that narcissists are codependent. So that sometimes confuses people, but that doesn't make codependents narcissistic. So they may or may not be. But
well, what's the difference between those two? What's the difference between a codependent? Or what is codependent? I mean, now I'm so confused.
Okay. Well, I have about 5 symptoms for codependency. I wrote this book, Codependency for Dummies. So it's somebody whose feelings and thoughts, or their behavior and their thinking, revolve around something outside of themselves. So that includes addiction. Could be a drug, it could be eating, it could be sex, gambling, or another person. So they lose touch with they're alienated from their true self. And that's where the healing comes. You have to come back to identifying your feelings, your thoughts, your needs, and then giving them value, because you may know them, but you don't give them value. You put other people first. That's one of the things in narcissistic relationships. Codependents are often involved with narcissists, and they both agree that the narcissist comes first.
Yeah.
So it works until more and more they become unhappy because they're not getting their needs met, and they're getting shamed, and they're getting devalued, and then it doesn't work so much for them anymore. So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to answer your question. So some of the key traits for a codependent would be shame, dysfunctional boundaries, dysfunctional communication. They're usually either passive or aggressive, or passive aggressive. They're not able to be assertive, and problems with intimacy. Control is a big issue. So they may be trying to help or advise somebody else. That's a form of kind of passive control versus do what I say. A narcissist would say, order you around and dominate you. But codependent will try to maybe control their own feelings or control in other ways. Denial is common. So frequently they call denial as the hallmark of addiction. So most codependents, they are not aware that they're codependent, and they may deny their feelings, deny their needs, as I said, deny abuse or dysfunction in their family. They think their family was great, and they don't realize that their emotional needs weren't met. So there's about 5 core issues, and underlying it all is shame, and they both share shame. So in a relationship between the two, a narcissist will idealizes power. That's what makes them feel safe. This is one of the determining traits that you said that's different. And I go into it in my book, Conquering Shame. So because of their personality, because of their childhood upbringing, narcissists, and some other people that aren't narcissists also, seek power to feel safe.
Right.
Where a codependent will seek connection. So they want to please, they want to get along. So typically, codependent will go along to get along. So a narcissist will go along to get ahead. That's all they care about. So they will sacrifice the relationship for power. So a codependent will sacrifice themselves for the relationship.
Right.
So one puts their power first, the codependent puts the relationship first. You have to understand that dynamic and the brain workings and the behavior of a narcissist to not take it personally. And not what happens all the time is people say, well, I did so much for him and for her, and they won't do one thing that I ask. Yeah, I would never act that way. How could they treat me? They don't understand the thinking of the narcissist, that it's like me first, and they lack empathy. So they don't often see you as a separate whole person. You become an extension of themselves. And this is the way their brain works. Their brain works differently. So a narcissist has trouble seeing other people. A codependent has trouble seeing themselves. So they're kind of like mirror images of it.
Right.
So they both see the narcissist. They both put the narcissist first until that doesn't work anymore.
I have an interesting question. Sorry, Melissa, I know you're dying to ask something.
No, you're right. Go right. No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, then if the narcissist is a narcissist and basically doesn't care about anybody else but his or her own feelings, right? And they are the center of the entire world. Do they ever reach out for help?
No,
They don't want to.
They rarely do. They might when their business fails or they're married, they go through a divorce. You know, one narcissist said to me after a divorce that when he went to therapy, he said, it was affecting my self-esteem. I had to take a drink just to get through the therapy session because they're not used to looking at themselves. You know, the problem is always at someone else. That's key to a lot because of their shame and insecurity. That explains just about all their behavior. And I write about it in my book and on my website. Just about everything they do is to deflect responsibility.
Yeah.
So, and even, you know, many codependents in the beginning, they have so much shame underneath that they'll deny that they did, you know, they did anything wrong, and they'll deny, and then finally maybe admit it. And then there's other codependents that always take responsibility and it's always their fault. There's different kinds of shame. So.
Wow, I was so seriously codependent when I was younger.
Well, there's a solution.
No, it's great. I feel like perhaps that I've gotten over that for the most part, but boy, did I! Wow, there's a lot.
Well, I was too.
I put everybody at, you know, and I was always at fault. Poor me, little victim. Oh, anyway, it's nice to know, but it's nice to have definition. I think that that's what's so challenging about these behaviors. And that's kind of, you know, mental health and mental balance in general. It's having an understanding, because I'm sure that solutions and remedies and recovery come from an understanding, an awakening to those behaviors, and then an awakening to yourself, and then an awakening to what you're thinking, how you're behaving, you know, and being aware of that, of all those things. It's interesting.
So I've shared in my book and before that, I was married to an alcoholic. So a lot of, before I started recovery, spouses, relatives, alcoholics nag and try to get the alcoholic to stop drinking. And they don't understand it's an addiction. And that is just feeding the shame. And they deny their own needs and don't, you know, have a life that everything is focused on the addict. So that behavior of trying to help and change an addict or a narcissist for that matter, it's pretty much the same, is a way of denial. Right. Because when I started healing, and learning about addiction, and I realized, oh, my husband could actually die of this disease. I had to go through grieving as part of my recovery, as if he died from it, to be able to let go and not react to it. The drinking had to become his problem. And when it became his problem, he had to find a solution. I wasn't the problem. So if you're trying to, you know, nag somebody or change somebody, which is typical of codependence, then you become the problem. Same with
Yeah.
a teenager, you become the problem. They don't suffer the consequences of their behavior. So they've shown from research, the most effective motivation for an addict to get help is suffering the consequences of their behavior. So enabling, covering up, calling the boss, making excuses, all that kind of behavior perpetuates the problem.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
So you're educating a narcissist to the consequence of his behavior, because they don't know their impact on other people. They don't see, it's like they're blind to everybody else's. Like I said, they're like cardboard cutouts, other people. So this kind of communication is not only motivates them, also because they're seeing the impact of their behavior. And by the way, you asked about treatment. The first step and you can use this kind of communication and my book to help your partner or sibling or whoever it is, friend, get to treatment. Usually the first thing they want to do is get their power back, because my book and this process shifts the power from the narcissist to a more equal, balanced relationship. And you'll see them start to become needy when you take back your power in the relationship, because you're no longer serving their addiction or their narcissism. Then they have to look at themselves. So the first step when they go to therapists, they want to get their power back. They're not really too interested in looking at themselves. So it takes some time, and then they distrust everybody, and they will have a power struggle with the therapist. So it'll take some time for them to want to stay in the therapy, to start to look at themselves, maybe their childhood, and see how their behavior is hurting them in their work, in their relationships, and in every area of their life. And they can change their behavior. They can learn to be less angry and be less confrontational and change their behavior. But it takes a commitment and motivation.
Do you have to address like childhood trauma or past trauma in order to find a healing or a recovery from narcissism or?
Well, I don't know about
codependency?
With codependency, it's one of the stages, and I write about it in my book, and most of my clients. But you can make huge progress without discussing your childhood. Clients sometimes say to me, I don't want to discuss my past or my childhood. And I say, that's fine. But it's funny that it keeps coming up because we keep getting triggered. And one of the ways of not getting triggered, like they say, well, I hear what you're saying, but every time my husband or my mother or somebody yells at me, I become speechless and I can't communicate with them and I freeze. Well, that's a trauma response.
Yeah.
So helping them go back to heal the trauma can kind of relieve some of that automatic trauma response. Freeze.
Yes.
It's PTSD. Basically.
Yeah.
Or CPTSD. So but you can still make a lot of progress without doing that by learning to be assertive and learning to set boundaries and learning to and raising your self-esteem. You can do all that. And I remember I confronted my husband about verbal abuse and he was shocked, but it diminished. It really helped the relationship. So, and I hadn't done any work about my childhood at that point. I hadn't been in therapy at all. So just going to 12-step meetings and practicing, building my self-esteem. What's really important to both narcissists and partners of addicts is to have a life. So part of the codependency is like you're focused on somebody else. And I have like a chapter in my book is like, you have to shift that and make you the focus of your life. There's a joke, in 12 steps that like when a codependent is dying, someone else's life flashes before them.
Oh my gosh.
I'm struck by we only have a few minutes left, but I am struck by something that you said earlier about a lot of addicts and the narcissism, that kind of that murky area between the two. And I think about how many addicts that we have incarcerated who may or may not be getting proper care to deal with not only their addiction, but this narcissism. And so then when they've done their time, now maybe why we're seeing the recidivism, the high rates of recidivism, is because there's no help for either issue, and maybe their addiction is only being looked at, and the narcissism is being overlooked. This is a huge point when you and I are talking, Mariel, about our penal system and the address that we need to have, and that was a fascinating point.
Darlene, your work is so good. I'm actually just literally why we're barely talking is that I know that both of us are taking it all in, and taking it into ourselves and the addicts we know, and everybody deals with this stuff. So your work is so important because I think all of us know somebody who is either codependent, a narcissist, an addict, all these different behaviors. And, the world is a challenging place. And I think we come up against this, in our relationships at work and our personal relationships and all that stuff. So I appreciate your work so much. Thank you so much for speaking to us. And I want to mention your book again, which, hang on. Yes. Dating, and loving. What is it? Dating, loving, and leaving a narcissist. Such an incredible book, and your other books, and your website. What's your website? What's the name of your website?
Well, first of all, you could just Google my name, Darlene.
Oh, okay.
That'll take you there. Or
Darlene Lancer, everybody. Darlene Lancer, Lancer. If you Google her, seriously, go there, look at her work and look at the tips and the points, because what she's doing is incredibly important. Thank you so much, Darlene, for joining us today.
Thank
and everybody,
you
if you're listening to this, don't go away, because Melissa's gonna come back with a lovely tip on energy.
Thank you for listening to Out Comes the Sun. This is Melissa Yamaguchi with Mariel Hemingway. I'm Melissa, she's Mariel, and I want to tell you about some energy tips. I visited someone who was in a hospital recently, and I began to think about the feng shui of hospitals and how important it is that the lay of the land, so to speak, is vital. Now, in feng shui, we deal with yin and yang energy. And yin energy being more oppressed, can be depressed, can be quiet, can be dark. Doesn't have to be, it depends on the degree of the yin energy. But hospitals are known as yin energy because they're dealing with so much sickness. So if you or a loved one are required to stay in a hospital room, there are things that you can do to shift the energy of the room. First, I want you to consider balancing the energy of yin and yang. Well, how do you do that? Well, think about this. Yin energy, as I said, is very repressed and really closed down and held down and sad, and everyone's weeping and it's scary. Yang energy is very aggressive and people are coming at you very hard, and maybe it's a very stern nurse or it's a doctor coming in and barking at you. Whatever that energy is, loved ones need to find the balance. I'll give you my mother as an example. My mother had a hip replacement one year, and I was staying with her before my children. I was staying in the hospital with my mom, and she had a nurse come in. Now imagine a hip replacement. My mother was anxious. She was nervous. She didn't know what this meant for her future walking capabilities, blah, blah, blah. And so she was a little bit nervous, and my mom's not really a nervous cat, but at this situation she was. She had a very, who knows what the backstory is, tired, cranky, hangry, I don't know what, nurse come in and was very aggressive physically with my mom, a little bitty gal too, pushing my mom over. My mother was wincing, and she said, I have other patients. I can't be babying you. I stepped in and shifted the energy immediately, not with an aggressive yang energy myself, like, hey, yelling at this woman, yawn energy, but I came out here and said, I've got it. I'll take care of her. I'll bathe her. So I bathed my mother's back and her arms, and I took care of my mother so that that aggressive yawn energy wouldn't upset my mother further and take her and spiral it. So you have to find the balance between yin and yang. And if something's too aggressive, you need to come in with some kindness. If it's too weepy, you need to come in with some loving firmness like that. The second thing I want to bring up is that you need to balance the colors. Oftentimes, hospital rooms will be all baby blue or white because they want to keep it clean. I understand, but there's a balance of colors. You can bring in your loved one's favorite robe or a throw blanket that they like to have that has a little bit of color. Bringing in a shift of color will shift the feng shui and the energy of the room to their favor, to the patient's favor. The next thing is you need to bring nature in. You know, there's a reason why we bring in flowers and plants to loved ones in the hospital. It's a way of letting them know that we're thinking of them, but it's also this incredibly amazing way to bring in nature to help them heal. Some hospitals that I'm aware of do have plants in the room, and it's very healing. So in the hospital rooms, if there are beams or columns that can obstruct the view and the patient's bed could be obstructed, the view could be obstructed by a beam or a column that's in place or a beam overhead. In feng shui, I know you can't get in and start rearranging stuff, but if there is a column that is obstructing your loved one's view from the hallway or seeing what's happening, and then you can place pictures of family members or loved ones or a pet, whatever is going to make them happy, or a picture of their home on this column. The objective in the hospital is to create an environment that is conducive to healing for the patient. You also want to avoid clutter. I had an uncle that was staying at a hospital and I had not spent the night with him. And I left him around 4 o'clock one afternoon, came back the next day to see him. And the room was awry. There was paper from the bendy straws on the floor. There were tape pieces. It was awry. It was cluttered. It wasn't dirty. It was just cluttered. So I immediately began to clean it, put everything away, and opened up the curtains to give my uncle some light. And he said, "I know it's silly, but I feel better." Well, I knew why he felt better. We were shifting the energy to his favor. And then lastly, it's lighting. Hospital lighting is not necessarily conducive to cheeriness. So, and what can you do? Can you bring in your own lamp? Yes. There are little lamps you can get at little stores now that only you can press them and they turn on, and it creates like a bedstand, a nightstand effect that you can bring in. If they don't have that lighting available, it's very inexpensive and you can shift the lighting. But the most important thing is knowing that you have control. And I would encourage you also, if you have a loved one in the hospital, this is not necessarily feng shui, but this is good energy. On the whiteboards they have at the base of the bed and the wall adjacent to your loved one in the bed, they'll have information, the name of the nurse or who's on duty today, or any kind of vital information that's for the incoming staff. I have made posters for my loved ones and placed it on that wall next to them saying, if it were for me, example, it would say, "I am Melissa Yamaguchi. I have been married 38 years. I am the mother of 2 children. I have worked in these fields," giving the staff a little bit of indication that you are a person. What happens oftentimes, I've had doctors and nurses say, I'm only given 30 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes in this room, max. I can't spend a lot of time. But if they see you as human, I did this for my mother and they said, "Oh, you're a school teacher. Oh, where did you teach?" And it began a conversation. So that's just an energetic tip, not necessarily a feng shui one, but stick around. Don't go way too far. Upcoming next with a tip for you on health or balance and living well is Mariel Hemingway.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I am thrilled to be back. You are listening to Out Comes the Sun Radio, and I do have a tip today. So I've been doing a lot of traveling. I do a lot of traveling. And so I want to talk about travel. And like, there's so many people that ask me, well, it's so hard to eat and this and that. Is it really? If you kind of organize yourself. So all you have to do is to really plan ahead. So when you're traveling, I always I bring snacks. If you know that the food's going to be disgusting or that there's not going to be a lot of options for healthy food in the airport, you bring some food. I have to be careful because one time I brought too large an almond butter and they took it away from me because I was like, this is liquid. I didn't think it was liquid, but anyway, so you have to kind of monitor these things, have little compartments, but things to put carrots or celery or something to snack on if you need food. Sometimes I just fast when I'm on a plane, but if I know that like I've already intermittent fast too many hours and I need something, I plan ahead and I bring food. That's one thing. Always, you know, you always have to get water at the airport. Make sure you get good water. Try to get water. The best water is not in plastic. It's very rare that you find one, but they now are having these bottles that are in aluminum, which are kind of interesting. So it's nice to have an option that isn't plastic. Now, we don't always have that option. I'm just saying Fiji water is also a good option, even though it is in plastic. It's good plastic in the sense that it's got a good rating on the plastic. So that's kind of the travel day. You want to have your food, you want to have your water, you want to make sure that you have enough water on the plane, because I don't really recommend the water that you get in the plane, because it's not the best water. It just isn't the best. I'm sorry to say. I think that it's just tap water put in a plastic bottle, but I can't be sure of that. But anyway, it's a preference. I prefer to get as good a water as I possibly can. And yes, you have to pay for water because they just do that to you when you're in the airport. Then when you get to your hotel room, it's so important. It's kind of like what Melissa's saying about going into a hospital. You kind of have to make it your own. Even if you have a short stay, it's like, put things in. Okay, I'm in a hotel room right now, so you kind of have to put things away right away. I always think that it's good to like unpack yourself, you know, do your bathroom so you feel kind of the comforts of like, I can get to my stuff easily. I like when they have a refrigerator, because I can put, you know, whatever. I often run to a Whole Foods, or I run to the best market that they have in town, and I get just a few items that I know in case dinner's not going to be at a great place, that I have something, right? You have to plan to have things for yourself, because traveling is not an excuse to not take care of yourself. In fact, I always find it kind of interesting because you don't have the stress of life at home and all the responsibilities at home, that I think of it as like, oh, this is a great time to take even better care of myself. So I also bring with me blackout material. I have a felt that goes on the window, and I put those up on the window, or usually, you know, they have blackout curtains, but they're never quite enough. And so I have to put down the sides of the windows just to make sure that it's really black, because I sleep well in a dark room. But especially when you go to a new town and a new place and you're in a new time zone, it's hard to sleep well unless you've got a dark room. So that's super, super important. I always ask for a room that is in the back, that is away from like a traffic, if it's possible. You know, it's not always possible, but you know, that's one of the things you think about. And try to get your circadian rhythm in sync with your chronometer, which is your internal body clock, right? You want to get it so that you're pretty much on the same schedule. It's often hard when you do time zones, but if you're going long distance, don't take a nap when you get to Europe. You know, like wait till it's time to go to bed in the evening. And it's hard. It's a suffering time, but it's so much better than if you nap and because that just perpetuates the whole problem. And I've never had a problem with jet lag by just staying awake that first day. It's so funny because Bobby has a horrible time. He can't stay awake. He goes and he naps and he has days of jet lag. Anyway, so that's the other thing you want to do. You want to do food. You want to be able to black out. I even take an earthing mat, which I put on my mattress underneath the fitted sheet. I just stuff it in there, right? And then I plug it into the wall. And what the earthing mat does is it grounds you when you're sleeping. And I travel with it. And being grounded in your sleep is one of the most helpful things you can do while traveling. Now, if you don't have a grounding mat, here's another trick to help you with your circadian rhythm and getting on the right time schedule. If you're in a place, it's not in the middle of winter, and you can go outside and there's some grass, take your shoes off or just sit on the grass for 20 minutes. Lie back on the grass, look up at the sky, especially in summer. It is one of the greatest ways to just ground yourself, and you will feel so differently just by, or it's literally called earthing, it's called grounding. And that the electricity from the earth comes into your body and helps regulate your circadian clock. So that's my tip on traveling. I'm excited about that because, you know, I think we all travel. It's summer. So we're all out there trying to see our friends and family in different parts of the world. And we should do it and feel really good while we're doing it. So that's it. That's my tip. That's my tip.
I like it. It made me think of when we had Eddie F on the other day and he was talking about using your plane trip to fast.
Yeah,
Time on the plane to fast. Yeah.
it is a good time. I mean, I usually fast on a plane, but once in a while you just find yourself like ravenous and you don't even know why. And it's like, oh my
Is that chicken piccata?
Yeah,
It's always chicken piccata, by the way.
exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, anyway, what a wonderful show. What a terrific guest. I'm really thrilled to have this information by Darlene Lancer. That was really
Very informative. Yeah, I sat there. Were you doing what I was doing? I was Rolodexing through my brain of everybody I know, going, "Oops, either A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D."
Yeah,
That person goes, yeah. And I conveniently, yeah.
Oh my God, there's all three.
Yeah. My gym teacher. Yeah.
It was wild. You know, I really found it interesting that she said that you didn't have to look at your trauma. I wanted to get argumentative because I feel like you can't fully recover from stuff because I don't think I would have recovered from being massively codependent if I hadn't looked at the trauma that caused it in the first place. But that's me, you know.
But she gave something that she said at the end, which our viewers weren't privy to. She talked about percentages in the prisons.
Yeah.
She said 60% are psychopath, like 20% are sociopath, and the remaining balance are narcissist.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, is that overwhelming? That overwhelmed me when she said it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little crazy.
Yeah.
But that's what you're dealing with when you deal with bad behaviors and what have you. There's got to be an imbalance in the brain. There's got to be something it's not syncing up right, or it's addiction. You know, then there's addiction, which is causing, and which may be caused by this shame or this, you know,
shame and then the childhood. Going back to what your point was, going back to addressing what happened in childhood. Right.
Exactly.
Fascinating stuff. I mean, we're going to have, we'll bring more of this conversation on because this is something where you and I both are kind of spellbound. Learning.
Yeah.
So we'll bring more on. Yeah.
Totally. I'm fascinated by it because I you know, that really tells me that we're in a world where our behaviors are so, well, we can identify behaviors, which is wonderful. Yes. Right. So for the Mariel Hemingway Foundation, that's exactly what we want to be able to do, is be able to give you that list of things for different things that might be bothering you. And so you can recognize them. Yeah. So anyway, thank you everyone for listening to Out Comes the Sun Radio. And also, again, I just want to say, if you are compelled or drawn to, go to marielhemingwayfoundation.org and help us become a resource navigator. It's with your help that we become that, and we can give solutions for recovery for anybody who's suffering from any kind of mental imbalance, mental illness, or what have you. But we need your help in order to do that. So thank you, and we'll see you again soon and hear you again soon, or you'll hear us. Anyway, something like that.